And I mean, it was so illustrative to me. And it speaks to what you're saying in resiliency and the way that and I say this again as a law enforcement administrator, we focus a lot on putting people in a box, saying, well, we're not separating people who make bad choices from people in poverty. Then certainly they overlap sometimes, but certainly not completely. But many people just want to create, that's just one big bucket. And then the other thing I would mention, we're talking about at our table, because it has to do with criminalizing poverty, is, and I worked in another state for 20 years before I came to the state of Washington. One of the problems that we have in our state is our system is heavily weighted toward revenue within our system as opposed to what it should be weighted toward. In other words, tickets cost, a no insurance ticket is $300 plus. That's $300 cash for somebody to pay. We continue to pile fees and tolls and license fees on very regressive, taxes. So we talk about social justice, but we're not doing it. And again, this is coming from a cop who's kind of a conservative. I mean, we want to talk that way, then walk the walk. And our system, with a lot of municipal courts and a lot of areas that offenders need to go to, is based upon revenue. The marijuana changes we're going through are based on revenue. Alcohol privatization is based on revenue, and not public safety or helping people to get out of that hole, that cycle that they can't seem to get out of. So that's a long answer to the question, but that's how we begin to decriminalize it, is to pay attention to how do you help people succeed that are making tough choices, as opposed to people who are making just plain bad choices and punishing them in a revenue-based system. If that makes sense.
Michelle, I was going to ask you.
Thanks, Cole. I was only going to make the comment that an example, the state of Oklahoma plans its prison budget based on their 4th grade reading scores. So our responsibility at the district level is to make sure every child, regardless of what home they come from or not a home, can read and compute, do their math and science so that they have hope for a future that's different.
Is there anyone else on the panel who wants to give an answer to this question? Larry?
I would just comment. I mean, we all see the issue from where we sit. So often, I see poverty as just folks that are in our community, and we're all the same. And some of us go in and out of poverty. There's just a whole lot of that in our community, for example, where smaller things can take folks over the edge. And conversely, opportunities and people taking advantage of services or resources can help them readily move out of poverty. And so my reaction just to your comment, when we think of poverty, we don't want to just think of folks that are really long-term with multiple barriers. There's lots of folks that live in poverty and can kind of come in and out within our economy.
We have another question in the crowd. Yes.
So the issue of resiliency and education was brought up, and how poverty impacts resiliency and education. And I think the other way is also true, that education, if you're poor, you probably have a lower level of education. But I always get really frustrated seeing people not just looking at individuals living in poverty and assuming they're ignorant, that they didn't know how to make choices. So my question to the panel is, how can we educate the community to help them understand that, a poor family, a poor mother, a poor father may love their child just as much as they do because they have means. So how would you educate the community and help them understand, what poverty is shorthand for?
You want to address that to anyone in particular, Patricia? Anyone like to answer that? No, it's a tough question. Okay, Michelle.
I think one way is really by our actions, right? And I think it's often been said that good people, I don't think I got that wrong. It's often said that great people do what good people think, and great communities do what good communities think, right? So it's the doing. So I think one of the things that is educating the community have the same expectations academically for all children. That we don't say we have one expectation for certain children and another expectation for other children. I think that's at the base of the concern. Otherwise, we replicate the social structure. And that's not what public schools are for. So I would answer the question by saying we maintain the same expectations for all children and all families and the same access. So we don't create obstacles, if you will, like you have to apply to get to do this kind of program, but then a lot of parents don't hear about it, so they don't know to apply, so the kid doesn't have a chance. And then we say everyone can, but if you didn't know, sorry, deadline passed, you know, all those types of things. So I think you have the high expectations, going back to this question, and maintain high support. I also think a big piece of the community around this topic is fear, right? When there's time when our economy is slow, there are diminishing resources, and when there are diminishing resources, we start competing with one another for them. Even agencies probably in this room, if we're very frank, compete with one another, you know, for certain funds. And so when we stop collaborating and start competing, there's a fear that starts to take place, and then everything is looked at a little differently. And I think part of educating a community is talking about how we work together, not how we compete to sort of stay viable ourselves personally, if that makes sense. So that's how I would answer that.
Scott, I was wondering if you have an answer for that.
So I sat in the center, so I carefully thought this out. I'd be the fourth person to be asked. I could hear these great ideas. You sit in the middle, people don't really notice you. With a moderator, you're stuck. Okay, so I agree. If I understand what you're asking here is, how do you educate a community, especially those who are in poverty? Is that what you're asking?
No, how do you, I mean, somebody that is not from a poor family, I mean, they have these kind of perceptions about.
It's more families that have not experienced poverty.
Yeah.
How do we educate them to be a little bit more empathetic and caring and get involved in supporting all these great resources and organizations, and
Yeah.
really help them understand that it may not be a choice.
Okay, so I'm pretty pragmatic. I don't think people learn well unless they see an example. So I think what the world needs is heroes. We don't have a lot of people that set good examples about what it means to be poor and or how they overcome poverty to do things. There are examples, but we don't champion those. And they're kind of hard to find these days. I mean, who are our heroes? So who do our kids look up to as heroes? They're ultra-rich sports folks who may have come from poverty, but I don't think that's the example I'm talking about. I'm talking about someone that overcomes some adversity and shows that you're a contributing part of society, regardless of where you came from on the poverty scale, that you're contributing to society now. I mean, used to be we looked at presidents as heroes, but most of our presidents are filthy rich and come from very wealthy backgrounds for the most part. So I think it's a trick to find role models that set a good example that anyone can latch onto. How do you do that? You gotta make it okay to talk about it. I don't think, people that have known me probably for 13 years have never heard me tell that story of, I came from a very, very poor family, not just one generation after generation after generation. So I think stories like that, example.
We have another question out in the audience. Okay, over here. Got a long way to go, Kathy. Come on.
Along those same lines, I am a child of the 60s. I marched on the freeway to protest the Vietnam War. I saw thousands of my contemporaries doing the same. How do we get people fired up? Because this problem is getting worse, it's not getting better. And we need a huge groundswell of protest to get this problem solved. And how do we do that when these people in poverty don't have the time or the energy to do it themselves? We all are doing it. How do we get other people involved?
Which one of you feels like an activist? Okay.
I'll be an activist. I'm not sure if this is directly addressing your question, but I personally believe there is so much power in a story. I think each person's story, each one of those 2,819 people we served last year had a very powerful story that took them through our doors. And as a society, we tend to want to latch on to the story of the kid that slept in the car that somehow magically got to Harvard and now is a doctor somewhere. And we want to latch on to that story, but the reality is so many of these stories are just not like that. I mean, we've got mental illness. What do we do with that? You know, we've got substance abuse issues. We've got hardworking people that are living on minimum wage at 25 or 30 hours a week. You know, we need to be able to share the story so people can start to hear a real description of what poverty is.
Larry?
I think we each need to do the best we can to engage people in our operations so they have opportunities to work side by side and connect with people that are low income or in poverty. I mean, there's really, to me, two key ways to connect people or to have people care about and get active. And they both have to do with touching folks emotionally. You have to, I think, where you work side by side with people and you develop a relationship, then it really helps you understand and to care about it. And the other thing, I'll just mention this American Winter video that we talked about earlier that we're going to show again. Things like that, it's a bit vicarious, but it's a way that larger numbers of people who are not particularly connected or not, at least emotionally, to the issue can come and can better understand and feel the struggles that families have in poverty, and then have call for action in ways that people can actually, through the many great organizations that we have here, become engaged.
Kirsten?
First, I want to say that we have made already tremendous progress in this area in the last 10 years. 10 years ago, a lot of people didn't even know we had people who were homeless in our community. 10 years ago, we wouldn't be having a conversation with 187 people in this room who are all excited and interested and inspired to do something about it. So first, I want to remind us that we have already made tremendous progress in our understanding of the issues of poverty and homelessness. And so I let that buoy me up when I'm feeling despair about looking around and seeing how much further we still have to go. We can make progress, and we have made progress. I think, building on what some of the other panelists have said, I think it's really about making it, about humanizing it and destigmatizing poverty and being poor. I also grew up very poor and didn't want anybody to know about it. And that in and of itself makes you not really be who you are. And it in our society, being poor or homeless is so stigmatized that people go to great lengths to hide it. And it makes them not want to reach out and ask for help early on in the process that might be able to prevent it from spiraling. And if there's a way that we can talk to our children about acceptance and compassion for all people, no matter what their socioeconomic backgrounds, I think that's a start. That's what I try to do at home, so that we can grow a generation of kids and adults and parents that don't look down on people who are poor, don't make assumptions about poverty, who are accepting and kind and want to make sure there's opportunities for everybody.
Okay, I'm going to ask a question now. And Julie, I'm going to ask you to answer first, if you don't mind. I'm just warning you. So my question is truly ending poverty in our community something that we should actually strive for? Ending it. getting rid of poverty in our community? Is that something we should be trying to do? And is that even possible? Any thoughts on that one?
Wow.
Thanks, Cole.
I think we should be trying to end poverty, because of all of the negative consequences associated with poverty. People, so when I got involved in the affordable housing industry, the woman I worked for had a bumper sticker that said, "Housing is a human right." We live in one of probably the richest country in the world. And so the idea that we have people who are homeless, who can't get their health care needs met, who don't know whether they're gonna eat today or tomorrow, that's just not acceptable. And so I think we need to continue to work on fighting poverty.
Do you think it's possible to actually eliminate it? Is that something that can be done?
I don't know, but I think we can reduce the negative effects of it.
Okay. How about you, Monica?
I'm not sure that it ever can be solved. It's such a complicated issue, but I'm an idealist, and I really believe that we have to aim high, and we may not reach it, but for every person that we do reach, for every success story, for every person that now has a roof over their head, it ended poverty for that family. So taking it one person, one family at a time and seeing success that way, as a community, I think is very important. Always strive to end, but remember that it's always about the individual.
And Chief, I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
I'm going to go all police chief on you here. I would say it this way, and there's certainly a school of thought that would say that the line will always move, so there will always be the poor, there will always be somebody with that end.
That's part of what I'm getting at.
Yeah, and so you can make the argument, you can chase that all day, but I would, as we're talking about this, I have to be honest, when I give talks to different groups and have conversations with people, oftentimes, and again, you all know this, the phrase homeless or person in poverty is often another word for, well, that's a person who really made bad choices, and they're a drug addict and an alcoholic, and they're lazy, and they're criminals, and that's the guy who's pounding on my window at the Jack in the Box trying to get a buck so he can go buy a 40-ounce small liquor. And I want those people run out of my town. And that's a reasonable point of view. I mean, I get what they're saying, but we're confusing two different things. There's jerks who are homeless, and there are homeless people who are certainly not jerks. And I think that the public in many ways confuses those two things. So it kind of goes back to your last question. How do we get people to start to understand this? Because when I give a talk, I will often say, we are focused on getting rid of jerks. People that are floating around, breaking into cars, trying to support a habit. Yes, they're addicted, and I feel bad about that, but they're impacting other people in a very negative way, and I don't want them in my town anymore. But then when I say, but the young woman with 2 kids in her station wagon, do you want to help her? Well, absolutely. Everybody wants to help them. Well, they're getting all mushed together, and if we want to make a difference, I think in the big group out there that's driving public opinion, it's way too easy to say, well, they don't have food for their kids because they bought a new F-150 and they bought cigarettes. And that happens. It does. We see it. So how do we begin to have a conversation instead of saying, those stupid people, they just make poor personal choices, and what am I supposed to do about that? They're using their food stamps the wrong way. It gets into the talk radio world, and everyone's got an opinion, and they're very polarized. And I come from a law enforcement, more conservative perspective. We all want to help people who are doing the best they can and trying to work or get a job or doing what they are. But let's call jerks jerks and separate them out. I mean, people that are impacting other people in a negative way because they choose to are very different than what we're talking about today. But if we go out there, a lot of people are going to say that they're the same people. And so I'd like to see us separated a little bit more, if that makes sense.
Anyone else on the panel want to take a crack at that question? Larry's willing.
I always have. I mean, asking the question, will we end poverty, is kind of like, can we create world peace. Or even more concretely, I think of the International Rotary Campaign to end polio. Absolutely, we should be doing these things because they're the right thing to do. They are they're the fair thing to do. Whether we can actually get every person in poverty from being poor, or whether we can eliminate all conflict in the world, or whether we can get to 100%, as Rotarians are trying to do, eliminating polio. That's not the point. I think the main point is for us to keep moving in that direction because it's the right thing to do, and it's because poverty is not good for us individually or collectively.
Yes, we can end poverty.
There we go.
Yes,
There.
we can. And it's going to be really difficult, and it's going to require a lot of very deep foundational societal changes. Because the things that are causing poverty are the things that we have to change. Right? Poverty is a symptom, not a cause. It is a symptom of a lot of social injustice, a lot of joblessness, homelessness, lack of opportunity. I mean, there's a whole long list of things that contribute to poverty. If we all collectively as a society decide that we want to change those things, we can totally do it.
Hallelujah. Thank you. Any questions from the crowd? Yeah.
I'll use my cheerleader voice. So I have a question for Larry, a challenge for the